Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Business Matters Insight 360, which is being organized by Academic City College in Accra, Ghana. We currently have just about 100 participants registered, and we've got almost 30 present at the moment, and all our invited panelists are also on here. So we'll get started. I just want to welcome you all to this, our very first virtual Business Matters Insight 360. This is actually an event that takes place in Academic City once a semester. But obviously, because of the COVID, we've had to translate it all online, and so that's why we're doing this. And this is our first virtual event. So welcome. The reason behind Business Matters Insight 360 is really to explore some of the intersections between trends, facts, and events within industries. And what we do is pick up on a specific industry and look at it from different perspectives. So the very first one we did was, just a little bit of background, was on agriculture, where we explored the agricultural sector from all perspectives, from the perspective of the manufacturer, from the perspective of the consumer and the retailer and so forth, and just see how those various sides of that industry interact and the dynamics between them, and also to explore any new trends and ideas and thinking within that industry. And so what has really prompted this is, again, looking at a relevant subject, which is very clear today with regards to the COVID pandemic and its effect on entrepreneurs. You will know that Academic City is very much focused in terms of the way that we deliver our programs on entrepreneurship. And so this is quite relevant and topical. So ordinarily would have had students, faculty, staff, and we currently have the same audience, but even more because it's gone virtual. So we have some businesses who have registered to join us, small businesses. We may have a couple of media houses also with us. And so we will kickstart. First of all, I'll just run you through the program. Would first of all like to have our president, Professor Fred McBagonlori, to give us a short overview of Academic City, and then I'll go on to introduce the speakers. We have 4 speakers on the panel today. We have 4 speakers from different industries, entrepreneurs, and from four different continents as well. So it'd be quite interesting to see, or to find out what their experiences is in the pandemic. And then at the end, we will have times for questions and answers and discussion. And hopefully we should be out of here within the next hour and 15 to 30 minutes. So I will hand over to Professor Fred McBagonlori to tell us a little bit about Academic City. Thank you. So I think Fred is muted. Can we unmute him, please? Thank you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So I guess you missed everything I had said before.
We definitely did. You'd have to start again, I'm afraid.
Okay, so let me replay. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a few takeaways from this that you can go back and implement. Academic City is a silent revolution in higher education in Africa. We are trying to push the boundaries. The last 3 industrial revolutions, as we know, went by Africa very quickly. We can no longer afford to be passive observers of history. And so at Academic City, we are trying to create an ecosystem where we are going to create the next generation of not just African leaders, but also entrepreneurs who can push the boundaries for us. We focus on skills. And so what I'm going to do is kind of take one step back and tell you about the future of education, which is what we are driving here in Africa. We think industry is ready for folks to come in and be plugged in from day one. We are interested in making sure that our students are developed to mimic what happens in the real life when you are in an industry where people from a cross-functional perspective come together to deliver. We are trying to build these ethos in Academic City by focusing on project-based and also on competency-based type of education. We want our students to experience, we want them to be brave enough to break new boundaries and to reinvent the future. Okay. So from a future of education perspective, those are the boundaries that we are pushing. Now, what are the ethos that actually drive an institution such as ours? We want our students to be holistic. By holistic development, it means where IQ and EQ kind of converges very nicely. We want them to be innovative. Innovation just doesn't mean building new things or coming up with great things, but we want them to be able to reimagine the environment around them. Is Africa the Africa we all want? And if the answer is no, how can we create the Africa that we will all want? We want our institution to be student-centric. And student-centric is a mouthful. But if you come into our workshop, you will see the president of the university, you see deans of our colleges, you see faculty members actually working with students to try not just to innovate, but to also imagine and to reinvent our environment. So our ethos is around, how do we get innovative, but transitioning away from the rote memorization that education in general is characterized by in this part of the world. So that's our ethos. Now, what are our learning pillars? When each faculty member walks into the classroom, what is it that they are trying to achieve with this new generation of Africans that we want to come out and not only seize the continent, but play a very active role in the global arena? Experiential learning is one of our core learning pillars. Just hearing things being told to you is not as good as really getting to the ground and touching them, really experiencing them. And we are not limited to where we expose these students. We can send them to a farm if they need to be in a farm. We send them to a factory to really see how things come together, how the theory in the classroom latches onto the practical aspects that makes a society move. It has to be contextual. The story about Africa has always been students being able to tell you what a British Isle looks like from a geography class. They can sketch it and pinpoint where Wales is, where Scotland is, where Southern England is. But in their own backyard, they are unable to do that. We want to make our educational system relevant to the African context. The other thing that we push quite hard, and I touched on it briefly previously, is this concept of unified learning, which basically says, in the real world, it takes more than one specialization to get things moving. No matter what industry you work in, if you provide services, if you provide products, You put together teams to make things happen. In the medical device space that I'm quite familiar with, on a typical team, you have an engineer, you have a quality control person, you have a medical person, you have a clinical person, and it is a synthesis of ideas from all these cross-disciplinary folks that actually realize whatever products we're putting out there. So why should we train our students different from what they will actually experience in the real world? So unified learning for us brings a marketing student, an accounting student, an IT student, an engineering student to a project. And each and every one of them brings the perspective of their discipline to the project. So if you're a communication person, you better be able to tell how you would describe that product to a customer who is not technically savvy. If you're a marketing person, you should be able to tease out requirements from customers and do focus groups and collect data and analyze that data. If you're an engineer, you should be versed in form, fit, and function. And it is a synthesis of folks across these disciplines that actually we believe will help move the needle forward for Africa. And then we have extensional, which is our fourth pillar. And with the extensional, all we are trying to say is, we can't teach you every single thing in 4 years. What we are giving you is a toolkit. And our intent is that in the future, when you meet new problems, you can revisit this toolkit, or you can retool the kit to solve those problems. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. The next thing that makes us quite different, quite unique, is because we ask the reverse question. If Africa were a problem to be solved, how are you going to solve her? And then we try to build an educational system around that. So if you go onto the streets today in major African countries with a microphone in your hands, and you ask a cross-section of people, what is the problem with this continent? One of the things you will hear them say loud and clear is that we lack good leadership. I've heard that all my life, and I'll be 50 this year. And I wish we don't have to say that for the next 50 years that I intend to be alive. You say logical thinking. People are not critical thinking. Our people are not thinking. Our educational system is rote memorization. People just pass exams and move on. In some places on this continent, if you over-criticize government, you go to jail. So we cannot even hold intelligent discussions without it being diverted into the political arena. We hear people talk about technology. We need to get more technology. We need to integrate technology. And if you live in a place like Ghana, sometimes you can actually drive through the bushes and see bulldozers and combine harvesters lying in the bushes and wasting away, while farmers are still carrying hoes and machetes around. If you ask people what are the problems in Africa, they'll tell you doing business here is very difficult. Corruption is a nice way to put it. You can't get anything past the bureaucracy. It's so frustrating. And so what we decided to do is that we need to bring a strong liberal arts component into our program. And that has to be defined around these variables, these intangible variables that everybody talks about, but somehow we ought to do something about. So all our students take a course in African Studies. And what we tried to do with African Studies was to move away from the euphoria of the great kingdoms of the past. The Shanghai, the Mali, the Ghana, the Kankamusa, all these great feats that you know, of course, satisfies an Afrocentric view of what we ought to do, which is all nice to have. But the question that I asked when I took over my responsibilities was to say, if I have to teach one single course on African Studies to students, what would it be? And the answer was simple. I'm going to touch on post-colonialism. What happened when we took over this continent? What did we do with it? Can we realistically talk about the polarization, the tribalism, the corruption, the civil wars? Now, but before we get there, you know, let's ground ourselves in reality. We live in a very difficult neighborhood. Yes, there are adverse climatic conditions in Africa. Yes, there is disease. But those could be entrepreneurial opportunities that we have to address. But we want you to know that that this neighborhood is tough. And then once we go through this polarization, what is the new African Renaissance that we need to look forward to? And how is each and every one of you an integral part of this journey? Not as an observer, not as somebody caught up in the euphoria of the past, but let's face the realities that post-colonialism, we screwed up this continent and we need to fix it. And we have to have difficult conversations. So you're going to take a course on text and meaning, which is literary criticism. We're going to be logical thinkers, you know? We're going to focus on solving problems. So you're going to take a course on critical learning, and logic and critical thinking. Now, you want good technology, you want to understand how technology can be integrated into our societies to streamline things and to make things more effective, to reduce corruption. Well, let's talk about technology and society. You talk about poor leadership. The future leaders are sitting in this class, and you need to start learning to retool yourself for the challenges ahead. So you're going to take 2 courses on leadership. And the interesting thing about this leadership is that we are going to bring in experienced people who have lived the leadership experience to talk to you. So you will see a general who stood his ground in Rwanda when the West fled and helped to prevent what could have been worse than it was. You want us to build this continent. Let's stop depending on government and the bureaucracy for jobs. Let's create jobs. Every one of you is going to take 4 modules on entrepreneurship. And let's be realistic about this environment. It is difficult to do business here. All of us are going to take a course on doing business in Africa. And this kind of sets the stage for what we call the liberal arts component of what we offer. And all these 6 are relevant to what you hear people say on the streets of Accra when you ask them, why do we seem not to be going anywhere? Or how do we get somewhere? Okay. So what Academic City has been trying to do is to define a strong ethos around what should be the education of the future, to define Africa around the imperatives that we ought to solve to move forward as a continent, and to build a new generation of African leaders who are confident, who have a sense of purpose, and who are able to move the boundaries. This summer, I had the opportunity of working with 6 amazing undergraduate students, all in their 2nd year, who stood up to build ventilators at the time when everybody was cowering and wondering what was going to happen with this pandemic. That is the kind of leadership we want here. We want people that believe in Africa, people that can stand up to Africa, and people that will help us actually to recover our past innovations. Africa was a hub of great innovations, from the Delta in North Africa to the beautiful kente cloths that we all wear today. The physics in it, it's amazing. And so I welcome all of you to this wonderful webinar, and I look forward to engaging with you as we go. Academic City is an open book. We are all learning. Every one of my faculty or administrators are students. They're trying to learn new things. They are trying to move the needle for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, for that very elaborate introduction of Academic City. I'd like to move on to now introduce our key panelists. The first, and by the way, just to let you know, I know each of these panelists personally and have met them in different ways on my journey. And so it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on this webinar. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Vanessa Afonja, Director of VA Property Consultants in the UK. So Vanessa owns VA and is the Director of VA, which is an estate agency in Bedfordshire. Behind every move is a journey, and Vanessa's job is to make sure that that journey happens, whatever the story. Vanessa loves what she does, and doing what she loves for over 10 years, has birthed homes and great investments for hundreds of clients whilst creating a thriving 6-figure business. This is VA. As well as a striving businesswoman, she's a mother of 3 teenagers, and like millions of other women, she takes on the daily challenge of juggling life's events and surprises, whatever it may be. However, the key to her personal and professional journey is to keep a positive mindset and smile. Our second speaker is Dr. Derek Ofori, who is the CEO of Zutron Pharmaceuticals Limited, which is a startup pharmaceutical wholesaling and manufacturing company in Ghana. Derek is also an executive director of McNeil Incorporated in Dallas, Texas, that is involved in healthcare and real estate development. Dr. Ofori holds a Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Massachusetts University of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, and currently licensed to practice pharmacy in the US and in Ghana. He also holds a BSc in chemistry from Texas A&M University at Prairie View. In 2016, Derek was in charge of development and implementation of the Remote Order Entry, ROE, for clinical pharmacists at the Baylor Scott and White Hospital in Dallas, Texas, to improve efficiency and quality of pharmacy operations. The development of the ROE program has now been adopted by BSWH hospitals in Texas. He is a mentor to several young men in Ghana and an avid believer in education. Our third speaker is Kamalika. Kamalika Bhattacharya is the CEO and co-founder of Codec, which is India's largest mobile enterprise learning platform. Kamalika's passion for entrepreneurship has been built over through a long career where, for the most of it, she has worked with startups and ventures to raise private equity and venture capital for them. She founded Codec in 2010 with a view to marrying her love for gaming with her ambition of building a global business. Starting the business from a room in her house, she has grown Codec into a thriving company with marquee Fortune 500 clients. At Codec, she leads as CEO and drives the team's hunger to be better, bigger, and faster. Kamalika holds an MBA from the prestigious Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and is an economics graduate from Osmania University. Our fourth and final speaker is Mr. Isaac Nkumsa. So Isaac is the president of Origo Software, and he's a technology visionary who now serves as its CEO and Chief Technology Officer, and founded Origo Software in 2004. Before founding Origo, Mr. Nkumsa spent more than 20 years delivering complex solutions for Fortune 500 enterprises. He developed Amtrak's first onboard point of sale system and KLA Tenco's Clarity semiconductor manufacturing analysis architecture, and also served as the managing enterprise architect for San Francisco International Airport. Isaac developed the digital convergence architecture framework and the Gazelle platform over a decade, adding insights gained from his broad experience and deep domain expertise as a technology architect and leader. He founded Origo to productize his successful consulting experience and expand digital convergence to a broad range of organizations. Mr. Nkumsa now serves as an advisor to enterprise as they look to scale and transform their operations in the cloud to drive better engagement and seamless experiences. So those are our speakers, and dear participants, you can see that we have a broad range of experiences across the various panelists we're going to speak to. And so I will now hand over to Vanessa, who will start off and tell us a bit about herself and her business and how she has navigated the challenges and opportunities that COVID has presented to her business. Vanessa, you're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me, Academic City. I think I spoke to somebody earlier who said he was going to put up the slides as a cue. Is that still happening?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Great. So my name is Vanessa Rafonja, as Linda has introduced me, and I run an estate agency business in the UK. Business during COVID-19 lockdown for VA has been a positive experience, and what I want to share with you today is and when I say positive, I mean from a positive business point of view. Obviously there is the nasty sides of the pandemic, but in terms of how I and my company have tackled and worked through the pandemic and running a business has been very positive. So what I would like to share with you today, if you could change the slide, please. What I would like to share with you today is what I call the, is that one slide too? Okay. What I'd like to share with you today is the keys, really. The keys to how I manage running my business during this period. And for me, obviously the pandemic it almost seemed to come at us as a surprise, although there was talk of, we knew that the virus was there and we could see the effect from the media as to what was going on. But in the UK, when they told us to shut down as a country and everybody to stay at home, that almost just crept on us very, very quickly. So I found myself as a business owner and director having to quickly close down the company, decide what to do with different members of staff, and then form a new system to work and navigate in a territory that obviously was unfamiliar to all of us. So one of the key things that I found in terms of managing a business during this period was routine. That was one of my major lockdown keys, in terms of keeping to a routine for myself personally and keeping to a routine with the business as a whole, because obviously there was the whole scary side to what was going on in terms of the virus, the rate of death, everything that we were being fed by the media. But at the end of the day, one still had a responsibility to uphold the business, keep it running, because ultimately when the pandemic or the lockdown was lifted, I wanted the business to be able to return, and I wanted to return to work with all my staff. It was a very scary time in the sense of I didn't know what was going to be ahead of me, would be able to turn the business around, would be able to generate anything while we were going through the lockdown, which we did, but it was all about routine for me. So one of the things that I found that the discipline of routine was keeping to some of the regular things that I would do, regardless of a pandemic situation. So my wake up morning routine, and these things might seem very small and not business related, but it's quite interesting and amazing that, oh, please introduce, sorry, I've just been told to please introduce myself. Okay, so if I introduce myself again, my name is Vanessa Rafonja. I'm the owner director of Earth. No, I'm getting very confused here. Okay, sorry. There's messages coming on the chat and it's not clear who the message is for. So if I carry on, so the routine of working the business and waking up and just keeping myself on routine was really important. I think that when, as individuals, if you lose routine or you let your routine go, it can then kind of take everything else with it. So for me, getting up on time, you'd be surprised, a lot of people in our industry, because we sell properties, we rent properties and we manage properties, that was a business activity that was deemed not essential in the beginning, and in the height of lockdown, we were not an essential service. So what we found was many of my counterparts, many of the other estate agencies literally just shut the door on their business, closed up, went home, and basically didn't do anything apart from follow the news and wait and wish for the lockdown to be over. But for me, that was not an option. For me, it was about looking at the situation and trying to see what I could do and what I needed to do to work through it, rather than just close the doors and wait for our government to tell us to reopen again as a business. So waking up on time, as if I was going to the office, because obviously now I was based from home, was really important, and keeping to my morning routine, which includes things like working out and taking care of family business, but keeping to that routine religiously every day, as if I was in the same mindset of as in going to the office. Forward planning was a major part of my routine. So as a business owner, many things are thrown at you from day to day, week to week. So during lockdown, it was no different. We were dealing with different types of issues, and it was for me to take those issues and be able to forward plan on behalf of the business, on behalf of my clients, on behalf of my staff, so that I then had strategies to be able to deal with things that were going to start to unfold in front of us. So in an emerging pandemic, when you don't know what's going to happen, forward planning would seem a little bit crazy. But for me, it was a case of, well, what are the things that could go wrong? Okay, financially, people are not able to work in many cases. So there's going to be financial issues. So for us, that meant clients that would not be able to pay their rent, because we take rental income for properties that we look after. So for me, again, it was about forward planning. What would we do should such situation arise with our clients? How would we manage that? How would we see them through? What resources did I have to find in order to then deliver a financial management plan for clients? So I forward planned as much as I could from day to day, week to week, to be able to be proactive as well as reactive to what was happening during the lockdown, and also shutdown. So for me, you know, when you're working from home and you're working in such a very tight situation, there is no shutdown, because you're constantly on the laptop, you're constantly on the phone, and it could just literally, your days can just blur from one to the other. So I made it quite a discipline to shut down at a particular time or time window every single day, and have a catch up with my manager. That was the only one person that was working at the time. Everybody else we had put on furlough, and we would have an appraisal of the day and literally shut down and sort of summarize and put things forward for the next day for forward planning. So keeping routine as a business owner is essential, because if you lose the routine, the business loses the structure. And if the business loses structure, everything else starts to quickly kind of rapidly go out the window. If I can have the next slide, please. Again, being organized massively links to routine. So you can't run a business without being organized across the different facets of what we do. So again, during lockdown, for me, there were things that I had to put in place very quickly from a business owner's point of view in terms of systems. We weren't particularly very forward as a business in terms of being on the cloud and having cloud-based solutions to host our data, to host our information. We already operated on things like VoIP systems, which is an internet telephony system. We already had that in place. So again, as a business owner, it was looking at what were the key principles to keep the business running, and therefore what would I need to organize to ensure that we could work, have access to data, have access to telephone communications, whilst we were not allowed to go out and we were not able to access the office. So again, being very organized and thinking about the systems we had, quickly putting new systems in place, which has been an amazing experience. And I've learned a lot about technology within the business during the lockdown, was something that was very key to running the business during lockdown COVID-19. Having one-to-ones I found was really essential. So as I just mentioned, I was working predominantly with just my manager throughout the whole lockdown experience. So it was very key where you've gone from a company of 6, 7, 8 people to all of a sudden being a company of just 2, to ensure that we were engaging constantly on a day-to-day basis, as well as summarizing in the evenings, so that we were able to, I guess, be in harmony with one another, because we were running the whole company and carrying every single department. So keeping the remote one-to-ones, technology such as Zoom and TeamViewer were obviously techniques that we then started using, and we've carried on since. And that made a massive difference to keeping the communication seamless between us. And like I said, we would revise and review on a daily as well as a weekly basis during the lockdown period what we had to do based on what was unfolding, based on the government guidelines. And then we started to put into place some what we called COVID-19 business practices that we would then adopt to start working the business. So like I said, a lot of businesses shut down during lockdown, but what I decided to do was turn it on its head and look at how we could operate safely and how we could operate underneath the government guidelines. So I came up with a lot of new ways to work the company. We then started using things like video techniques with our clients. So typically as an agent, we would go out and show houses and meet and greet people. But then we turned that around. So where we had empty properties, we decided we would do videos for video marketing and use that as a way to engage with people. And then just going on to my last slide, I think, which is probably the last, and I've got literally no time. So the last slide was all about, as an individual, just keeping up with what I called continuous professional development. So again, during lockdown, I personally was involved with a training group that represent estate agencies. So I was constantly training, constantly learning new information so that I could use that to develop the business. And like Linda read out in my brief statement earlier, keeping a positive mental attitude. That for me was huge. You know, facing the day with positivity, looking at the good despite the bad situation that we're in, and using that energy to run the business and organize things and take things forward. And that's what really worked for us as a small business during lockdown. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. That's fantastic in terms of how you managed your time in this very uncertain times, and how you viewed and revised your systems in order to adapt to change. Thank you. Just for the participants, there's a Q&A panel, so could you kindly pose your questions in there for your speakers so that we can direct it to them, and then we'll have the discussions at the end. The next speaker is Dr. Derek Ofori. Derek, you're welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Academic City, this university, for the opportunity for us to share our experiences on the impact of COVID-19 on our businesses. So I'll start with a brief introduction. The name of the company is Zutron Pharmaceuticals, and I am the CEO of the company. My email address is here for any follow-up questions, and that's my company website. Next slide, please. All right, so just to give a brief overview, in terms of what we do, we are a manufacturing and wholesale company. We deal with, ordering and manufacturing some tablets, topical creams, and IV drugs. We also deal with rapid diagnostic test kits, and those kits are usually something that is commonly used in clinics and doctors' offices to make clinical decisions within a short amount of time, usually under 30 minutes to get a response on a test. We also supply hospital consumables such as the blood collection tubes, gloves, face masks, syringes, and all other consumables that are often used in the hospital. Now, we also deal with herbal products, and that's also something that we have incorporated into our business. Now, what I want to basically focus on is how the pandemic affected our business. We know this pandemic affected all businesses, and for us, it affected several lines or product lines of our businesses. Products that were not directly related to the treatment or management of COVID basically was actually very affected. We noticed that sales in our diagnostic test kits, which is something that is often used in patients when they visit the doctor's offices, or products that were not directly associated with the management of this disease. What we decided to do was to basically find a way to incorporate the products that we have into the management of this disease. So we realized that the products that were used most often in the hospitals for blood collection and some of these rapid diagnosis tests, we realized those products were not moving because of a specific reason. And the reason was basically the fact that patients were no longer visiting facilities or hospitals to get their routine exams done. Now not seeing that patients coming to the facility. So therefore, looking at collection teams, we're not going to make sales of those type of products. Well, during this time period, we realized that the hospital staff also were cut down in the economy. We decided to go into work. So
I think your sound has gone off a little bit.
Let me, is it
Yeah,
better?
that's much better. Yes, yes.
All right, great. So what we realized was the fact that in the hospitals, the staff was cut down. So we had hospital staff showing up 1 week and not showing up for an additional 1 or 2 weeks after they showed up to work. We are a sales company. We have sales reps that go out there to speak to some of these critical decision makers in the hospital. And their presence was very critical to our book of business. So we noticed significantly a drop in our product lines. We had pharmaceutical products that were routinely used for treating patients, like some of the IV drugs for treating infections or blood pressure medications and critical care drugs. But we realized that these drugs had gone down. So what we decided to do was to find a way to tap into this COVID disease. And the only way we could do that was to fight the disease itself. So we sat down and looked at the products that we currently have. And several products that we had, we realized could actually be very beneficial in the management or prevention of COVID. Some of the products were the brain white syrup, which is a high strength omega-3 food supplement. Now, this omega-3 food supplement has been proven to boost the immune system based on its clinical properties. We had multivitamins, which were in the form of gummy vitamins. It contained vitamin C, which we all know is good to boost the immune system. And it also has vitamin D, which has some good benefits in boosting the overall immune system. We also had, fortunately for us, we had one of the key drugs that was used during that is being used in the management of COVID, which was the antibiotic azithromycin. And of course, we had some of our hospital consumables. Now, what we realized was that even though we had some of these products, we did not have enough in stock to, especially with the hospital PPEs, we did not have enough in stock to be able to be profitable during this pandemic period. But we also realized that these other products that we had, like the immune boosting products, were actually to our benefit. So what we as a company decided to do was to divert our focus more on these products that we believe can boost the immune system. And we actually were very successful in regards to our sales. We noticed that our stocks were going very fast. For the multivitamin gummies, we realized that for most kids that did not like taking regular tablets, this was actually one way for them to consume their daily vitamins and also boost their immune system. So that was definitely a very successful opportunity for us. In regards to some of the few things that we learned during this pandemic, we realized that the fact that we had a diverse product list made a difference for us, okay? We had two products that were in high demand to boost the immune system. We had an antibiotic that was one of the recommended drug treatments for COVID. And we also contracted with a local company to manufacture hand sanitizers and other sanitizers to help in preventing the disease. Now, because of these opportunities that came up, we noticed we are expanding our product line. Without the pandemic or without the COVID being present, we believe we would not have gotten to the opportunity of manufacturing hand sanitizers, but we know this disease is here to stay. It will be present for a while. There's currently no cure for the disease as of yet, but they are working on the vaccine. But we also know that even with the vaccine being present, you still need products to help boost your immune system for diseases like this. So we are also in the process in manufacturing our own proprietary vitamins that would help boost the immune system. So that is another opportunity that we took advantage of during this pandemic. We also, during this process, found out that as much as we benefited in creating our brand awareness by all this social media ads that we did, we also donated a few items to facilities that we believe would benefit the community. So overall, we think as much as this pandemic came and it was a disruption to several businesses, we saw some opportunities in this disease. We were able to maximize our selling on some products that did not sell as fast as we previously did. We were able to create our own hand sanitizer product, and we're working on developing a multivitamin. And we're also able to give back some of the products that we make to the society. But overall, we felt that as much as we saw all these benefits, there were still some gaps that we believe as a business we could have taken advantage of. We know the pandemic was in the US and was spread in Italy. From a business perspective, we believe we could have been more proactive in regards to reaching out to some of our suppliers and obtaining larger quantities of some of the products that we could actually market to make our business more successful in this time. So overall, there were certain lessons that we learned from this experience. Yes, we got some opportunities to create new products. We're able to expose ourselves, and we were also able to learn to be a little bit more proactive with some of these conditions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Derek Ofori. That's insightful to see how COVID has actually helped you to think about diversifying your business to date. And also, it's interesting to see some, in terms of demand in your product, how some products have actually taken off, which are COVID related. Thank you so much for that insight. I just want to quickly acknowledge the presence of Mr. Thomas Adingo from Business and Financial Times, who's joined us. And so, Mr. Thomas, you're welcome. The next speaker, our third speaker, is Kamilaka from India on codec technologies. Kamilaka, you're welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Linda, for having me here. It's great to be able to talk about my business and some of the learnings we've had, because sometimes entrepreneurship is a fairly lonely journey. And I think every other entrepreneur will attest to the fact that it keeps you on your toes at all times. So sometimes it's a pandemic, sometimes it could be some regulation, sometimes it could be something else, but entrepreneurship's always a up and down journey. So for us, entrepreneurship in the time of COVID, maybe it's a good place to start to tell you what we were pre-pandemic. So if you could just go to the next slide. Yeah. So Codec was launched in the Indian market about 6 years back. It's a technology product in the mobile learning space, where companies use it to reach their ecosystems, their employees, their vendors, their distributors, their sellers, anybody who essentially does business with the company or is part of their ecosystem to either sell or to provide the products. They can be reached using this platform. And the whole concept of the platform is to engage them, to create a community, to drive learning, to drive discussion, all of these things. So in the last 6 years, Codec's done very well in the Indian context. We are today the largest platform here with about 4.5 million users. We have pretty big blue chip Fortune 500 clients here, including the likes of Unilever, Vodafone, Swiggy, Flipkart, which is Walmart. All of them use this product to actually reach their extended ecosystems. We were a 38-member team running this company for the last maybe 10 years, out of which 6 have been in the product space. After having done reasonably well in India, we were actually planning our expansion into the US, into Europe, into the MENA region as well. And we were right on the cusp in March on, essentially a vertical product that we were launching for the banking industry. So we were scheduled to launch it in towards the end of March, around 31st March was when our product launch was planned. So in India, we went into lockdown on March 24th, and we actually went into lockdown about 10 days before that. We were doing it as an experiment to see if it was possible, if a large scale lockdown was triggered, we would be able to actually handle it. So we've been in lockdown now for a good 4 months with no plans of going back to our office. But essentially what the pandemic has done for us is brought out a lot of opportunity. A lot of enterprises were going down the digital route in terms of getting a lot of systems onto the cloud. They were looking to actually take a lot of their communication and learning digital. And this was a rather slow journey for a lot of enterprises. What COVID has done is actually accelerated that entire process, where digital is now becoming the primary means of communication across all of the value chains. So just as an example, if you have Amazon or Flipkart, these are e-commerce platforms, but essentially all the sellers who sell on these are physical, either they are retailers, they are, people who are doing small businesses, they provide these products on the e-commerce platforms. Now, while Flipkart provides this platform, they also have to engage this community with, an understanding of how to sell better, how to better package during COVID, how to safely package during COVID, how deliveries can be handled. And all of this communication actually today needs to be done digitally. It is no longer viable to have classroom sessions for a lot of these things. It is no longer viable to have distributor meets. It is no longer viable to have most of these face-to-face meetings. Therefore, digital becomes the primary mode of communication. This is a reality that a lot of our clients are waking up to today. And while some parts of their business have already, started the process of going digital, a large part of their business is still not there yet. Because it's not just about putting a platform in place, they also have to have an idea of how to drive that digital engagement, right? So what we started seeing was companies who were on the fence as far as digital was concerned, they started hopping over to our side of the fence very, very fast. So we saw a significant uptick in demand. We saw a lot of inbound queries coming to us. We saw a lot of conversions which were in the works for some time. So for us, it became a challenge to actually address the uptick in demand that we saw, given that we were also not able to meet with clients. Everything happened over call, everything happened over, these sort of conversations. Uh, the other thing that happened really for us was, our expansion plans into other markets were always physical expansion plans, where we had thought that we would set up, sales teams, we would set up salespeople, we would have to have an office. But today, what we're realizing is that physical borders are really, they're collapsing. So a lot of people in different countries are more willing to do conversations over the phone, over, video calls. They're happy to evaluate products without having to meet with salespeople, without having to physically be in front of them and see the product. And that actually opens up a lot of avenues for our business to grow without having to set up physical infrastructure everywhere. So while these became opportunities for us, they also consequently became some sort of roadblocks. So if you could go to the next slide, the one before, yeah. So our sales methods actually had to change pretty much completely, right? So we could no longer do face-to-face meetings with customers. We could not have interactions with end users where we do a lot of our product research. We couldn't do things like physical merchandising. We couldn't do sales meets with our channel partners. uh, we couldn't even meet our own sales team to actually drive motivation and performance, right? So our backslapping conversations, go out for a drink, create the camaraderie, that really totally collapsed. It is not the same thing to do this over a video call. What became more important to learn for us was, how do you do inside selling? How do you find leads online? How do you actually do Google ads and get people to come to you instead of having to go to them? Creating digital, engagement with our own ecosystem became very, very important, because we work with a whole network of partners who create content, who work with us on implementation. So we had to do a lot of campaigning and a lot of engagement with them to keep them, kind of engaged with us. And of course, because we couldn't push external parties to engage with us, we had to figure out ways to create pull. And of course, the biggest challenge was, getting onto digital tracking, making sure that we had systems which could collate data, give us beautiful dashboards, simple to look at, things which you could look at every day, and track performance rather than having to do it physically, which is what we would do. We would do weekly sales meetings with our sales team. So pretty much our sales organization transformed completely. We've now moved more towards channel approaches, where we are building up partnerships in different countries with other people who are selling either synergistic products, or we are talking to them about bundling our products with theirs, but basically creating more sales without having to take all of the cost of the salespeople in-house. If you could go to the next slide. Yeah, we also faced a lot of internal and team challenges. Compared to a lot of other businesses in India, we were already digital in nature. We are a tech company, which meant that we were already working on the cloud. Our developers were used to working remote. We had work from home policies in place. However, it was still a challenge, because while that can be used as an optionality in business as usual, in difficult times, if that is the only way that you can talk to people, then you need to have very strong tracking and productivity mechanisms. So we evaluated multiple systems, tried them out. We finally landed on Microsoft Teams. We launched kind of bring your own device policies with data security measures, because we work on proprietary code. Sometimes we work on integrations for clients which has sensitive data. we provided internet allowances, because what we realized is that we were now leaning on people's personal internet spending to do official work. So we had to introduce a whole layer of allowances, which we had to support people in bringing up infrastructure that they could actually work with. Infrastructure came, the challenges we saw were something that we could have, hardly anticipated. There was a significant migration out of the cities. We are based out of Bombay, which pretty much in India is the epicenter of the pandemic. So a lot of people started migrating back to their hometowns, and their internet became a huge challenge. So we started seeing drop-offs. People wouldn't be able to take calls. We wouldn't be able to share screens, and that's primarily how we do work, right? Uh, we also started to see, because there was no air conditioning, which is usually offered in, it's always there in our office, and people were working at home without air conditioning. We started to see laptops break down. So it became a significant cost for us to be able to replace these high-end laptops. We let go of our offices because it just didn't make sense to continue taking these rents. But I think the biggest impact that we saw was, really the emotional toll that it was taking on employees. Um, we had a lot of employee morale kind of going down because people were not used to being tracked 24/7, report what I do at the end of the day. They felt like they were being scrutinized. It was not an easy transition to make from the qualitative aspects of it. One of the saddest things we saw was that, women, a lot of our women employees, decided to quit because they could not take on the challenges of managing family, running the house, as well as working at the same time while they were sitting at home. Expectations on, family management became very difficult for them to handle. Um, though we tried to, work out options, they simply would not be able to take the stress over a prolonged period of time. So that was one of the more, I would say, tragic impacts that the pandemic has had. And from whatever I hear from a lot of, other entrepreneurs that I speak to, it's pretty much been the same across the board. Um, we the positives that have come out of this are, definitely the fact that we are finding great resources, and we're definitely trying to figure out, better ways of doing remote engagement with our teams. But I think if there is a central learning that I take away from this pandemic as an entrepreneur, and maybe it's not new, as a learning, but the most important thing is not to get wedded to a single way of doing things, right? The ability to actually junk something that worked for you before and move to something that could work for you now is, I think, the single most important quality to have as an entrepreneur. Understand the meaning of what sunk cost is, move on and do what works. So as long as I think you can keep that in mind and not get bogged down by things like this, I think a pandemic is just another challenge for an entrepreneur to face, not a very big one. So that's it from me. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Kamalika. That's interesting to know that even as a technology company, you're still having challenges, and more especially a challenge around employee engagement, which you'd have thought wouldn't necessarily be an issue. So that's interesting to know. Our fourth and final speaker is Mr. Isaac Nkumsa from Origo Software. You're welcome, Isaac.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Excellent. So all my conversation today is going to be centered around the advisory services that we provide. So our business is involved along three lines. We do solution delivery. That means we create apps and we create solutions that are market driven. We provide advisory services to our clients that come to us to figure out how to do transformation and how to streamline their business processes and so on. And then the third part is we have a platform that we sell to our clients that helps them to do pretty much helps them with their operations, streamline their operations, and to improve their productivity. So in learning about what our clients' needs are during these times, we've put together a 6-point guide that helps them to become more resilient through this period, and also helps them to go along their transformation journey. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. But before we get started, the first slide that we put together deals with 3 points that recognizes what's happening during a crisis. And this is something that got put together by a lady called Mirette Wedelborg with the Harvard Business Review. It outlines a crisis in 3 phases for management. There's the emergency phase, the regression phase, and the recovery phase. The emergency phase occurs in the beginning of the crisis, where people band together to try to solve the problem with a lot of energy focused on the problem, and they try to beat and survive the crisis. So this happened early for those of us in the US, happened earlier this year, around January through March timeframe. And then the regression phase follows with a lot of confusion, anxiety, and war room fatigue sets in as the reality of the difficulty of the crisis starts to settle in. So that would be around March, April, May timeframe for those of us in the US, and pretty much around the world as well. And then the final phase is the recovery phase, where you start to see leaders trying to induce ways to control the situation and effectively try to lead the organization towards a strategic alignment around a set of goals for getting out of the crisis and then operating in the new normal. We see a ripe opportunity for businesses, governments, and so on to emerge from this crisis with a path to transform how they deliver their services through innovation and becoming more resilient in a way that effectively de-risks operations and businesses and so on from disruption. So the fact of the matter is everyone's been disrupted. The question is, how do you deal with the disruption in a way that makes you more resilient and more capable of dealing with disruptions in the future? Because certainly this one's pretty significant, but there's nothing that tells us that this is the only time something like this is going to happen. In fact, this is the opportunity for us to figure out how to deal with these types of things moving forward, because this is probably going to be the new normal. So in response to that, we developed the 6 points for becoming more resilient during a pandemic. The first is how do you evolve the business model? The second point is making a social and environmental impact for your organization. How do you leverage intelligent cloud services to survive? And then how do you empower an adaptive workforce? And then how do you deal with your supply chains? And then finally, integrating digital convergence and automation into your business. So along those 6 points, I'll elaborate a little bit more further into them. So taking the first one, evolving the business model really means how do you engage in situational assessments to start out with. You want to ask yourself, where are you now and who are you as a business or an enterprise because of the way you do things. You want to look at how agile and resilient your current processes are. You want to be able to identify gaps and friction in your operations. And then you also want to look at managing your guardrails, right? How do you take metrics and KPIs that are surrounding your business operation and ask if you're measuring the right things in the first place, because you can't change what you don't measure. And so it's important to keep a tab on those metrics that your business is running with and understanding what they actually mean in the current conditions. You also want to figure out how your business is running in terms of lines of business. We recommend looking at your business as four different areas, right? You have your core business, you've got your innovation part of your business, you've got a line of business that should be sustainable, and then you also should have a line of business that's resilient, that keeps the lights on regardless of what's going on around you. You also want to look at how you deliver your services to your customers and what the management structures are around your service delivery. So with all of that, then you should be able to put yourself in a position where you're able to refine your mission and the cadence with which you look at those refinements, and then figuring out how streamlined your integration process for that mission, that revised mission is, in terms of integrating that mission into your operations moving forward. So I'll just give you an example on how that works. So our primary focus right now as a business is on delivering a telehealth solution across Africa, right? And by innovating, we're using conversational mobile for care delivery while working with local nonprofit artists in the San Francisco area to expose their work, in Oakland and San Francisco for storefronts that have been closed down that aren't operational. So in one way, we've pivoted our business to focus on our healthcare delivery as part of our core mission. But at the same time, we're also helping artists to reveal their artwork around the city in spaces that aren't being used actively, right? Restaurants and stores that are closed. The second point I want to touch on is making a social and environmental impact. With this point, you want to be basically looking at how you're aligning your business purpose with your social and community or environment around you. We're finding that enterprises that are pivoting to start looking at their social footprint are tending to gain more traction in terms of friends that they're creating, improved business posture in their environment. And you basically want to look at how you're engaging with businesses and local and regional communities and identifying structures, right, that impact your social impact, that affects your social impact, and structures that help you to manage those community and environmental relationships that you have. So for example, SFO as an airport is now focusing on, completing certain runway and terminal construction projects, but also facilitating the future use of sustainable aviation fuel in their operations. That would be an example. And the third point is leveraging intelligent cloud services. So at this point, a lot of businesses are recognizing the need to go digital. And that usually implies being able to run or operate using cloud infrastructure and cloud services. So from that standpoint, you want to look at what kind of cyber protection you have. You want to look at having 360-degree cyber protection for your workforce and for your infrastructure, right? That's very important as more people are working from home, and more people are working remotely, perhaps even more dependent on mobile devices. You want to make sure that all those devices are properly protected and protecting your business data and so on. You want to look at your data-driven objectives. What are your priorities around collecting data for your business, collecting data around your competitive situation? What are your services doing, and what types of data points are you collecting that informs you on how your cloud operation needs to be modified? You also want to look at automation in terms of your technology infrastructure. Or lack thereof, right? If there's opportunities for automating certain things in the enterprise, you want to take the time to look at those opportunities and figure out how you move those forward in your operations. You want to also look at infrastructure resilience and obviously cost management associated with that. In the past, there's been a lot of companies that have gone into the cloud and haven't given consideration to the cost factor that's involved. So we've found that that's a really important area where folks need to plan and project your costs and align your operational expenditures properly as you think about cloud migration. The other thing is fintech is becoming quite prevalent, and a lot of companies are taking this time as an opportunity to look at their posture with how they use fintech technologies and adopt fintech as part of their operations. And the last point with that is, how do you look at your services and rationalize the current infrastructure that you have as you plan a cloud migration? So for example, we're working with clients that want to transition operations into the cloud. We're helping them make decisions about streamlining their processes, operations, and helping them to save money and leveraging their OpEx budgets. The fourth point is empowering an adaptive workforce. As folks are working from home more and digital is becoming more prevalent as a way of work, you want to be able to evaluate your employees and their readiness for the new paradigm. You want to be able to align skill sets with new responsibilities. Basically, you want to also be able to manage organizational change a little differently in the cloud. Along with that comes, training opportunities, growth, education, process re-engineering, and just basically taking a step back and rethinking about working, the models of working for your employees, and providing them the resources to be able to be successful in the new paradigm. So for example, you might see service companies that are providing employees with budgets for them to be able to improve and adapt their home office space, right, for long-term work from home situations. And then also providing online training for new cloud services that are being added to their everyday processes. The fifth point is dealing with agile supply chains. This has to do with figuring out how to manage smarter assets, services, inventory sets, smarter contract management with your suppliers. If you're a manufacturer, how do you automate the movement of things in and out of your business and your enterprise? How do you automate the composition of things if you're creating goods and selling goods? It's a good time to reconsider your dependence on nearshore or offshore models, and also partnering with your suppliers to identify the gaps in your current models, right? And figure out what kind of constraints you have, what kind of friction you have as goods and services flow through your enterprise. You want to be able to work with service providers to find out if they're adaptable to helping you figure out a better way to deal with your supply chains and deal with your contracts to remove any risks in your supply chains. The final step we have here is integrating digital convergence and automation in your business. And what that means is you want to be able to activate operational intelligence, having dashboards available to leadership and also your line managers, so they can make the right decisions in real time all the time. And what that means is you have to have data-driven processes that are integrated into your business. How do you automate your service management in terms of delivering services to your customers and clients? How do you automate components of that? How do you provide innovation around events and data points that feed into your dashboards and other systems that are integrated in your business? Experience delivery. How do you assure that your customers are getting the best and ultimate experience with your business? And how do you manage the process of gaining intelligence from their experiences to inform your business on how you need to adapt? You need to look at how you're managing risks overall through the enterprise, and then also dealing with financial constraints or financial issues that need to be dealt with. Also, outcome-driven service dimensioning. How do you look at your services and the different lines of business and different dimensions of your offerings, and how they're all driving outcomes that are desirable, or outcomes that align with your business objectives? How do you calibrate metrics around that? And also basically integration with services and systems in and around your business. So an example of all that will be, how do you leverage digital convergence? In our case, we have a framework that helps us to drive those conversations to streamline your operations, integrations, and the delivery of operational intelligence to improve performance. And finally, can we move on to the next? So the next slide here talks about our framework, which is the digital convergence framework, and how it powers transformation for enterprises. Basically, it divides up the enterprise into three factors. You've got your operational factors, your dimensional factors, and transformational factors. Your operational factors are the drivers or your inputs into your business. Dimensional factors are the factors that your business operates on. So you're talking about your patterns, your assets, your actions and activities, processes, resources, and so on. And then your transformational factors are the outcomes or desired outputs that you want out of your business. And basically collecting metrics along these factors with a central point where we see APIs as application programming interfaces, or basically software services that center your business. We see that as a point of convergence, right? So what we try to do is we help our clients to automate their processes into these services that are driven by APIs. And with this model as a framework, you can then do things like discovery, evolution, or recognizing those services, configuring those services to deliver better outcomes, and then understanding the metrics that come along with those outcomes in order to adapt those services to drive transformation and evolution. So to recap everything, we talked about 3 crisis phases, and then we talked about the 6 points that we can use to guide your business resilience and reinvention to help you to transform. And then finally, we talked about how a convergence framework like DCAF that you see on the screen can be used to drive business transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isaac. That's been an interesting 6-point resilience framework for entrepreneurs to look at. I'm particularly interested in the development for social and environmental impact, which I think is quite essential at the moment for all enterprises and all companies, and how that also, impacts the management of risks and finances, especially for small businesses. I think that's key. Thank you very much for that. Just a quick reminder that we do have a poll, which will be coming up shortly. We're moving into the question and answer session for discussions, but in the meantime, we have a poll that is up. So please, attendees, feel free and answer them. It's just 5 questions, which is straightforward to go through. So we've got a few questions coming in, which I've fired to the relevant participants. We will go to Vanessa first. Vanessa, is that okay? There was a question here for you, which I think you may have actually responded online, but I will read it out anyway, and if you can just quickly address that. It says that they want to know how COVID or working from home has changed your perception of managing your employees. Would you prefer them working virtually or from physical location, or a blend?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because COVID-19 lockdown definitely changed my view of staff working in the office. I was never really a massive fan of working from home unless it was absolutely necessary. But yeah, what lockdown has shown us as a business is, with the right tools, with the right systems in place, with the right KPIs, as what was just recently mentioned, working from home is definitely the way forward, considering what's happened. And we have already started that across certain roles, particularly in the administration department. And also what we have, or what we are about to launch, is almost like what we're calling a pod. So we're going to actually we're using this experience to grow the company. And what I am doing is covering other locations that are further away from where we are actually based, because typically a real estate company will only service its local market. But the lockdown experience has shown that we can be virtual, and we can have other self-employed or employed people based in other locations, working underneath the brand, having access to the systems and software and technology that we use, and growing business in new areas. So for us, we're actually using it as a growth strategy. So we're just about to take on and develop our first what we call VA pod at the moment. And that's all come through the thinking and working and the virtual creativity that lockdown has imposed on us as a business. So it's been great.
Right, thanks. Yeah. Right, the next question is for Derek. It's asking, let's start from the top. It says, good to know of the opportunities that you've taken to your advantage. Are you looking at the opportunity to develop a vaccine yourself?
To the, I believe, individual that has a question, vaccine development is not a simple task. And as you can tell from what is happening on the market right now, there are several big companies that have actually partnered with other companies trying to find a solution for this vaccine, for this disease. The problem with that is there are so many complex technologies that are currently available for this development. And as a startup company, we do not have those resources to do that. But what we are doing in place as a solution is making sure that we are keeping up with the up-to-date information in the management of this disease. Now, most of the information that is currently available has mentioned that the current vaccines that are being developed, they are not sure how long the vaccines could help with the immunity that they expect from the vaccine. So saying all that, it is going to be a very complex vaccine to develop if we ever come up with a vaccine that would work for 6 months or even a year. So to answer your question, no, we cannot develop the vaccine because of the resources involved. And we right now are just following the news and looking at new technologies that can actually help with the prevention of this disease. And so far, there are few products, regular pharmaceutical drugs that research is being done on. And once the research is completed, I think we will have a solution to treat this condition. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Kamalika. It goes, if attrition rate for women is becoming high, and as you said, you'd be working off your office for a long time, off-site from your office for a long time, what are some of the measures you are taking to retain female employees in your organization?
So a couple of the things we've done is introduce completely flexible working hours for them. So while most employees usually log on at 9 in the morning and we do our status call at 6 in the evening, and by then their tasks have to be complete, based on what they've been assigned for the day, we allow, especially women with young families, difficult work situations at home, they take a more flexible approach. We actually, essentially look at them for tasks which are not so time critical. They can pick up things which are slightly longish term in nature. So the projects we assign to them are slightly different from what we would assign to, say, a couple of other people. As far as development resources are concerned, it's a lot easier for them because they can fit in coding, as and when they can do it, right? It's not a day-by-day task that's there. The other thing we're doing is for women who are for whom it's temporary. You've got a really a little baby at home. You can't work right now. What we're doing is introducing sabbatical programs. So you take 6 months off, get to a situation where you feel you're more able to come back to work, and then they can come back and rejoin us. So it depends on what they're doing. We've had to significantly change the way we look at women, but considering 2 out of the 3 founders of the company are women themselves, I think we've been able to make that transition pretty well.
Thank you. The final question is for Isaac. There's a question here on social and environmental impact and really exploring what sort of recommendations do you give to businesses to be able to adopt or develop those social and environmental impact changes?
Sure. I think from an environmental impact, I think it's useful to look at your core values, right? The core values of the business and what you're setting out to achieve as a business, and look for adjacent areas in the environment that relate to those core values, and that will drive a lot of success. In my case, we have several relationships with organizations that are working with local artists and local entrepreneurs and so on. And we try to keep tabs on what those organizations are doing all the time and asking them, how can we engage with what you're doing to help facilitate the impact you need, and how can we provide help with in terms of what our business is doing to those organizations. So it's just really a matter of being aware of what folks are doing around you and what you're doing in your environment, and figuring out really how to build relationships to make that impact.
All right, thanks. There's a final question here, which is really to all panelists, and I think anybody can pick this one up as you see. It says that some employees have been sacked during the COVID period. Is it appropriate for employers to place profit ahead of relationship with employees during this pandemic?
I'll weigh in a little on this.
Okay.
We were in the happy position of not having to let anybody go. So, as I said, we had a few team members leave us. But I do, as a business owner, the way I think about it is, if the viability of the business is affected, and you need to make certain hard decisions today to keep your business alive to fight another day in the future, I think it's a fair decision. It definitely needs to be made objectively and compassionately. Even in the past, when we've had to let somebody go, we've always made efforts to see if we can refer them somewhere else, find them something else. But I don't know if it's a smarter choice to run a business into the ground, continue taking costs out of the relationship imperative, because so many more people go down with that, right? So that's the way I look at it as a business owner, that if you do need to take hard decisions, you need to take them. It's part and parcel of running a business. I don't think it's a question of what's appropriate. I think it's a question of doing what's appropriate to keep your business running, because that works for the greater good of everybody.
Right. Any other views on that?
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I want to add a few points to what Kamalika had just said. That is absolutely true. For us, we actually saw an increase in sales of those products that were not moving as fast as we expected them to move. We challenged sales reps to go out there and promote the product as much as they can, either on social media or making phone calls, since some of them were not able to go to some facility. And what we realized was that in doing this, there was no need for us to have to let some employees go. We actually had the opportunity of even meeting targets and exceeding targets in one of the months, which was a very successful venture for us. So you definitely have to look at the operations of the whole company in general to be able to decide if you have to let somebody go during a pandemic or a situation like this, or having them stay. All right, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think this brings us really to the end of our discussion session. I think the poll is also done. Yes? Yes. The poll is completed. We are 6 minutes overrun, but good discussions, and it's been great having you. I would like to ask our Dean for the Faculty of Engineering, who is Dr. Lucy Ejapong, to just come and quickly summarize up and say thank you. But thank you so much, Isaac. Thank you so much, Derek, Kamilika, Vanessa, for joining us. I know you've been very busy. You're busy. Isaac, I know you had to wake up very early in the morning to do this, so thank you. We appreciate it. And all of you taking time out of your very busy schedule. Before you get on, Lucy, I also want to thank the technical team, Cyril, our PR manager, Sushil, our marketing manager, and Sydney, our social media person, who's been fantastic in making this happen. So thank you, guys. Lucy.
So thank you, everyone. It's been truly an interesting session. Personally, I have learned a lot. I think Linda has said it all. She said a big thank you to you, Vanessa. Thank you to Derek. Thank you to Kamalika. And then thank you to Isaac. I mean, we have taken a lot from this session. So Vanessa, I've taken a personal lesson from you that I'm going to have a routine, do some good forward planning, and then plan for the worst case scenario. That I'm going to be applying from now. Derek, I think the main thing we've taken from what you've said is that entrepreneurs and organizations, we need to be dynamic to be able to adapt. And again, I'm going to be buying the Brainwise syrup and the Yaya multivitamin gummies for my little one. Kamalika, I think what was intriguing or what was interesting, as Linda earlier mentioned, is that being a digital company, you would have thought the disruption to you would have been less. And I think it's quite interesting to know that even you had challenges, especially around the social, emotional aspect of it. So we want to commend you for the work that you're doing for work to assist and aid women, and being flexible is very, very vital. In this environment that we live in, such adaptability goes a long way. So Isaac, again, the 6 point for resilience during the pandemic, I think the nice thing about that is it's applicable to all professions, all industry, being entrepreneurship, startup, big companies, and you can apply each and every single step. One thing that you said that, again, I'm going to take away is that, and it feels like it's not bad news, but this pandemic is one of many to come. This is the new normal. We are going to keep on having different things that are coming up. So we need to position ourselves so that we'll be able to adapt or be able to, face any challenge or actual opportunity head on. In summary, basically, if you want to be a thriving business, you need to use this disruption as an opportunity to take you to the next level. So on that note, I'll say thank you so much. We have learned so much, and thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, all attendees, participants, for joining us.